missing. Just days after Christmas, on December 28th, two hunters found skeletal remains in the woods near Luberg Lake. The first officers on the scene were well aware that Robin was missing and that she had been pregnant, so they were actively looking for baby bones as well as her bones. And they did notice some baby bones scattered in the area. There was also some jewelry found near the skeletal remains that matched jewelry that Robin had been wearing when she went missing. The remains were soon identified as Robin Stone using dental records. There was no distinct damage to the skull or skeletal remains, so the cause of her death was unknown. It had never been established who the father of Robin's baby was, and police thought that figuring out who the father was the key to solving the case. The first suspect they looked at was a man named Lee Savage, and he was someone that Robin had been in a pretty serious relationship with. In fact, Lee had been the longest relationship that Robin had ever been in, and she reportedly told a lot of people that he was the father of the child and that she really wanted him to be involved in the baby's life. However, Lee always denied that he was the baby's father. So while police first are thinking they need to look at Lee Savage, things became very complicated when they found Robin's journal and realized that figuring out who the father wasn't going to be an easy task. Robin had been pretty honest about the fact that she had had several sexual partners. In fact, she had kept a journal where she would write down the date, which man she had been with, and kind of what they had done in bed together. And in this journal was almost daily entries. She also had some very detailed entries about how in love she was with Lee Savage. She talked about when they first met, when they first became intimate with each other. And then she would also write about how he was always breaking up with her and she would beg him to take her back. So, with all these different men now potentially being the father of the baby, there were a lot of men for police to kind of look into, but by reading her journal you could tell that Robin was really in love with Lee Savage. He was the one she really cared for. So while police did have this journal of names, for whatever reason they were never able to determine who the father was. And after two separate investigations into Robin's death, the case went cold due to a lack of evidence, and it stayed that way for 23 years. Years later, in 2014, the TV show Cold Case brought in some new investigators to try and solve the case. Their goal was basically to use DNA evidence to figure out who the father of the baby was. this baby to be born. He did not like Robin. He was very vocal about his belief that she was white trash and that he did not like his son messing around with her. And he was super mad that she was going around town telling everyone that his son was the father of her baby. Jack Savage was known to have a very bad temper, and he was extremely violent. But they needed to rule out Lee Savage, because it seemed like he had a lot of motive to want Robin dead. Lee, and also, as it would turn out, his father. The Savage family property was right up against the lake where Robin's remains were found. It was less than half a mile. Now, the man who had discovered Robin's car was named Jamie Hayhurst, and police believe that he found Robin's car within an hour to an hour and a half of when she had gone missing. At the time Robin went missing, he had a trailer, like an RV trailer. He kept it parked on his property, which was also near Louisburg Lake. But he had problems with local teenagers breaking into it and going through his stuff, damaging it, and using it as a place to party. So he would often drive by where he kept his trailer parked and just make sure that no one was there. So on the day that Robin went missing, he sees this suspicious car and he thinks he's about to catch someone breaking into his trailer. So he parks and he doesn't see anyone, and he puts his hand on the hood of the car and it's still warm. And this is on August 27th, the day that Robin went missing. He didn't find anyone near his trailer or in it, but he did call police because this car was not supposed to be on his property. And he thought that it belonged to a prowler or something. So this is how police had originally found Robin's car. Jamie Hayhurst told investigators that the Savage family was very familiar with the area, and they could have dumped the car because it was a very remote area, but had someone in the Savage family dumped the car, they could have gotten back to their house through the backwoods, and they would have never had to walk along a road. So no one would have ever seen them getting rid of the car. So basically what these investigators with this show now know is that whoever is responsible is very familiar with the area and wanted to separate where they dumped her body from where her car was found to try to throw police off the trail. Now, remember, Robin had told her mother that she was going to her friend's house when she disappeared. Her friend's mother was named Marigold Marcia, and she had actually called and talked to Jack Savage, Lee's father, as soon as she realized that she was missing. See, Robin's mother had called Marigold around 8:30 that night looking for her daughter, who was supposed to be at Marigold's house doing homework with her daughter. But when Marigold asked her daughter if Robin had been there, she said no, they hadn't had plans to hang out that day. Marigold told police that about a half hour after she got this call that Robin was missing, she called Jack Savage and she told him that Robin was is missing. And she's kind of in the middle of explaining the situation because she knows Robin is involved with Jack's son, so she's reaching out to see if maybe he knows something. So in the middle of trying to explain the situation, Jack Savage interrupts her and says, quote, "I hope that bitch is dead," end quote. And then he went on this rant talking about how she was telling everyone in town that his son is the father and there's no way his son is the father. And, he's calling her welfare trash. And Marigold just hangs up. She doesn't want to hear it. This account of Jack's reaction speaks volumes about his character, but it doesn't prove anything. Investigators then interview Elsie Tucker, who is Lee Savage's mother-in-law, or ex-mother-in-law, because they really want to get an insider's perspective into the Savage family. According to her, Lee once said that he may have been the father of Robin's child, and he also kind of alluded to the fact that his father could also be the father of the baby. When Elsie drops this bomb on investigators that Lee had been telling people that basically his father was also sexually involved with his girlfriend, they realize Lee or Jack Savage may be the father, and this gives both of them motive to kill. As soon as they get this information, they realize they need a search warrant to get DNA from Lee and Jack Savage. But to, be able to get those warrants, they need to have probable cause. So basically, they go to a prosecutor who says that if they can get another member of the Savage family to voluntarily give them a sample of DNA, and they can prove that the baby's bones are somehow related to this other Savage family member, then a judge would sign off on a warrant to collect DNA from both the father and the son. So they go to Lee Savage's ex-wife, Angela, and his now adult daughter, Valerie Wheeler. And Valerie agrees to get police a sample of her DNA to compare to the remains of Robin's baby. Basically, she's learning she may have had a brother or sister who had been murdered. While they're waiting for the DNA results, they are trying to gather everything possible about these two men. And they're speaking to a lot of women who are involved with Lee Savage. He had a lot of ex-girlfriends, and he had a couple of ex-wives. And they learn that Lee was physically abusive with all of them. He has an extremely bad temper. None of them had ever filed police reports against him, but they were all very scared of him. And there's this obvious pattern of when he gets angry, he abuses them. And they learn that he often choked his wives and girlfriends. So, police also get a statement from one of these ex-girlfriends, and she says that one time Lee was mad at her and he hurt her, and then he said, quote, "You're really lucky I didn't do to you what I did to that other girl," end quote. Savage first, and this guy's a real piece of work. They start talking to him about Robin, and he insists that his son didn't even meet Robin until she was 4 months pregnant. He repeats this statement over and over, saying like he knows for a fact, which is interesting to me because how would this guy know for a fact when this teenager got pregnant? Anyway, police have statements from several other people showing that he had known her much longer than that. And police tell him that, and he says, quote, "I don't give a crap what happened to that girl." And after he says this, and he is saying how she's trash, how she lied to everyone, how she told everyone that his son was the father and his son wasn't, police then say, look, we have DNA evidence with like a 99.4% chance that that baby belonged to either you or your son. And he flips a lid when they basically accuse him of being the father of Robin's baby. They say, we're here with a warrant to get your DNA, and he is like, you can take my DNA. But then he's like, quote, "Don't you come back here and say I'm a part of this, because buddy, I'll blow your ass off," end quote. So he just starts like ranting and raving and threatening the police. So it kind of seemed like he was hiding something, and police begin to wonder if maybe he was having a relationship with his son's girlfriend. So police then go to get a sample from Lee, and he seems pretty laid back. He doesn't flip out like his father. He acts like he hasn't done anything wrong. That, or he's just a really good liar. So police bring Lee in and they interview him, and he's like totally cool. He's answering questions about Robin and their relationship, and he seems like relaxed. And then they bring out the file that has all of these notes from his first interview with police. And they start showing him the different inconsistencies between what he just told them and what he told police 23 years earlier. And this is when he starts to get super defensive. He leans back, he crosses his arms, and then police tell him, after he starts denying everything, that they collected DNA from the unborn baby and they matched it with his daughter's DNA. And, there's like a 99%, up to this point, he had not ever admitted to having a sexual relationship with Robin. And then police are like, well, look, here's the DNA evidence. And then he's like, oh, well, maybe one time we were together, but that's it. So he's all like jammed up at this point. He's lying through his teeth, and they keep pointing out his like inconsistencies. And then they basically like say, look, here's a warrant for us to collect DNA from you. 2 days later, the DNA results come back, and they actually exclude Jack Savage from being the biological father. But they determined that Lee Savage was the father with a 99.99% probability. So after 23 years, the father of Robin's unborn baby is finally determined. Given Lee Savage's many lies to police over the years, his history of violence and the fact that he was, in fact, the baby's father, and that the remains were found near his house. Like, there was so much circumstantial evidence. So they take it to a prosecutor, hoping that they will, take this case to court, but unfortunately they do not have enough to file charges, because all they basically have is that Lee Savage is the father, but they cannot tie him to the murder. And so the prosecutor says, like, you have some good stuff here, it is not ready to go to court yet. And to this day, charges have never been filed. Police need evidence, and they do not have it. If you have any information about the murder of Robin Stone, please contact Detective Sam Williams at 740-439-4455. Through DNA testing, they were able to find out the gender of Robin's baby, and this was something Robin herself did not know, and her family never knew. But the unborn baby was a little boy, and her family was grateful for that news. They were grateful to know for sure who the father was, and they were grateful to know that the baby had been a little boy. When I was researching this case, and I found this episode of Cold Justice, I thought for sure this was going to be a cold case that was solved. And while they did, solve the paternity, her murder is still not ever been, charges have never been filed. There's never been a conviction. So this case is still a mystery. As always, I want to know what you guys think about this case.